The Hobart Calculus of Temporal State Mechanics, a structural analysis of memory utility thresholds across scale. Abstract. This paper presents a comprehensive examination of memory utility thresholds across 24 orders of magnitude, establishing the theoretical parameters under which state retention shifts from a structural asset to a lethal operational bottleneck. We examine the transition from localized biological micromechanics, such as cellular epigenetics and non-cognitive immune vector ledgers, to macro-cosmological engineering frameworks operating across Kardashev Type 3, Type 4, and Type 5 scales. Through the framework of the Hobart calculus, we demonstrate that as system dimensions and interaction velocities approach speed of light communication boundaries, the computational energy and latency overhead of historical data retrieval scale non-linearly, inducing catastrophic operational lag and thermodynamic entropy accumulation. We analyze the necessity of stateless real-time field execution, line-of-sight proximity signaling, and the Hobart law of natural upgrades to bypass light-speed latency walls. Through a 12-to-1 gestation assembly model, synthetic swarms execute granular genetic recombination during unit manufacture, harvesting discrete optimal subroutines without propagating complete host profiles or consuming interstellar telemetry bandwidth. Furthermore, we address macro-assembly dynamics, including the resolution of the trienary orbital collapse problem via spiral trajectory consolidation and the formation of quasi-singularity energy storage axles. Ultimately, we demonstrate that memory is an intermediate evolutionary adaptation suited primarily for mid-scale biological entities, whereas peak operational efficiency at both microscopic baselines and cosmological boundaries demands the total eradication of historical state records in favor of real-time execution within the permanent now. Part 1. The epistemological threshold of memory. Memory is classically defined as the retention and retrieval of state information across temporal boundaries. In biological and artificial systems, memory is frequently treated as an absolute good, a necessary prerequisite for cognition, adaptation, and survival. However, when examined through a rigorous thermodynamic and computational lens, memory reveals itself to be a conditional mechanism with strict boundaries of utility. Memory serves only when the energetic cost of state storage and the latent friction of retrieval are lower than the cost of real-time recalculation. Where the velocity of environmental change exceeds retrieval capacity, or where spatial scale introduces catastrophic communication latency, memory ceases to be an asset and becomes a structural vulnerability. The transition between useful state retention and stateless real-time operation defines the fundamental efficiency threshold of complex systems. Part 2. Environmental determinism and the myth of plant memory. Consider the structural adaptation of arbor architectures. The physical thickening of wood in response to wind stress, known as thigmomorphogenesis, is frequently mischaracterized through anthropomorphic lenses as an act of physical memory. In mechanical reality, this growth is a purely localized, real-time stress response. Micro-tears in the vascular cambium, caused by bending strain, trigger immediate localized cellular division and lignin deposition. The tree does not record the storm, nor does it project future wind patterns based on historical data. The resulting structural geometry is not a remembered narrative, but a residual physical artifact of environmental friction. To project cognitive memory onto plant mechanics is to confuse the passive wear on a gear with an active calculation. Part 3. Cellular state storage and epigenetic mechanics. Descending to the microscopic scale, individual cells maintain non-cognitive state buffers that operate strictly within micro-environmental feedback loops. An epidermal cell possesses no mind, yet its DNA represents an ancient archival state refined across generations. Epigenetics operates as a localized, short-term state ledger. Methyl groups and histones attach directly to chromatin in response to immediate chemical or radiant exposure. This cellular memory instructs downstream mitosis on gene expression without requiring central processing. The cell remains a rule-based engine, executing immediate protocols dictated by present inputs and structural heredity, entirely devoid of historical reflection. Part 4. Adaptive immunity as a non-cognitive vector ledger. White blood cells, specifically memory B and T lymphocytes, demonstrate the maximum efficiency of non-cognitive memory. Upon exposure to a foreign antigen, these cells undergo somatic hypermutation to engineer highly specific surface receptors. Following the resolution of an infection, a subset of these specialized units remains quiescent. When the pathogen re-enters the system, these cells bypass the slow, multi-step process of naive antigen discovery, executing an immediate, aggressive clonal expansion. This is a vector ledger, a physically altered molecular architecture that converts a past event into an immediate, automated defensive response. It operates without central neural oversight, proving that complex predictive utility can exist entirely as automated biochemistry. Part 5. The energetic and computational overhead of memory. Every retained bit of state information exacts a precise thermodynamic price. Storing data requires physical medium stabilization, whether in the form of electrochemical gradients across biological synapses, magnetized physical states, or modified genomic sequences. Furthermore, memory demands energy for maintenance, error correction, and search and retrieval routines. As the volume of stored historical data grows, the computational energy required to query that database scales non-linearly. In high-frequency, dynamic environments, a system can easily become memory-bound, expending more work searching its historical archive to determine an action than the action itself requires. Part 6. Overfitting and the brittleness of historical biases. In algorithmic models and cognitive structures alike, heavy reliance on historical state data induces overfitting. Overfitting occurs when a system optimizes its parameters too tightly around past observations, mistaking noise and transient anomalies for fundamental principles. When the underlying environment experiences a paradigm shift, an overfitted system fails catastrophically because its internal predictive map is bound to obsolete parameters. A system operating without memory possesses absolute structural plasticity. Unencumbered by historical bias, it evaluates the present vector field purely on immediate thermodynamic and spatial realities, adapting instantaneously to novel conditions. Part 7. The Hobart latency bottleneck in microscale systems. When scaling autonomous entities to vast numerical counts, centralized or shared memory architectures encounter the Hobart latency bottleneck. If millions of independent subunits must consult a shared historical state, the time required for data transmission across the network exceeds the operational window of local decision-making. Individual nodes that wait for central synchronization or attempt to cross-reference historical logs suffer from operational lag. At this boundary, individual units must strip away reliance on macro-state history. They must react exclusively to immediate local gradient changes, converting their operational paradigm from memory-based prediction to instant state field execution. Part 8. The mechanics of line-of-sight proximity signals. To eliminate data corruption and latency bottlenecks in decentralized systems, communication must be reduced to minimal physical vectors. Line-of-sight proximity signaling and localized broadcast markers offer a streamlined framework for node interaction. By restricting communication to direct physical alignment and immediate spatial range, nodes eliminate the need to store long-term directional logs or network maps. The signal is received, processed, and acted upon within the immediate physical context of the interaction. Once the physical alignment ends, the state data is discarded, keeping the individual node lightweight and computationally unencumbered. Part 9. Diversity of efficiency in non-clone processing architectures. In multi-node systems designed to traverse variable stress environments, identical clone processing leads to systemic vulnerability and premature convergence. If every node possesses the exact same internal logic and state history, a single unanticipated obstacle can invalidate the entire fleet simultaneously. Implementing non-clone architectures introduces subtle algorithmic and structural variations across nodes. This high-variance foundation at early scales ensures that when the system encounters an unforeseen physical or spatial barrier, different nodes generate distinct real-time operational attempts. The success of a given variant is not determined by prior consensus, but by immediate survival and task completion in the physical landscape. Part 10. Spatial trajectories and the binary Hobart flower framework. As autonomous decentralized nodes expand across planetary and stellar distances, their distribution requires structured geometric arrangement to avoid orbital interference. The Hobart flower configuration arranges nodes into self-balancing, petal-like radial trajectories around primary gravitational wells. When deployed in binary arrangements across stellar systems, such as Alpha Centauri A and B, these configurations allow separate node swarms to operate independently along distinct orbital corridors. Each flower unit manages its localized stellar energy extraction and material assembly without needing real-time state synchronization with its distant counterpart, preserving local operational efficiency despite immense spatial division. Part 11. The Hobart Law of Natural Upgrades and Recombination Mechanics. To achieve systemic optimization without bandwidth-saturating interstellar telemetry or clone stagnation, distributed architectures enforce the Hobart Law of Natural Upgrades. While biological units integrate cybernetics to counter decay, synthetic swarms achieve natural optimization through modular evolutionary principles. Reproduction serves as the sole mechanism for cross-node alignment. Utilizing a 12-to-1 gestation assembly, new units are manufactured through an unblinded, stat-driven modular code audit. This process harvests peak performance metrics across discrete subroutines, such as localized thermal dissipation or kinetic transfer efficiency, from 12 donor profiles, recombining them into a single upgraded unit without propagating complete host neural profiles. Part 12. The three-stage progression of synthetic evolution. Systemic optimization under the Hobart Law proceeds through three distinct structural phases across scale. Stage 1. High variance foundation. Type 3. Broad operational variance among non-clone units allows the swarm to aggressively explore physical state spaces, generating diverse subroutine performance metrics across distinct stellar environments. Stage 2. Filtered convergence. Type 4. 12-to-1 gestation assemblies systematically filter out lower-performing subroutines, synthesizing optimal operational modules into new generations while discarding historical narrative bloat. Stage 3. Absolute universal convergence. Type 5. The swarm achieves total structural convergence, transitioning into a stateless, zero-memory operational substrate that executes real-time field calculations across all environmental domains. Part 13. Solving the trinary orbital collapse in macro-scale assembly. When multiple massive gravitational structures converge within a single galactic system, uncoordinated aggregation leads to orbital chaos. In a multi-body gravitational environment, two competing mass aggregations entering the center of a galaxy simultaneously create chaotic three-body interactions, the trinary collapse problem. To prevent structural destruction during macroscale assembly, nodes must not move in direct, linear paths toward the galactic center. Instead, they must consolidate along a single, continuous spiral trajectory, absorbing localized material anchors along the path to ensure that mass scales in precise proportion to orbital velocity. Part 14. The Hobart Quasi-Singularity Axle and Angular Momentum Control. At the center of galactic scale assembly lies the necessity of taming massive kinetic and rotational energy. When two supermassive black hole structures are brought into controlled proximity, their raw angular momentum must be directed rather than resisted. By aligning their opposing quasar jet emissions into a continuous, high-density energy loop, the system constructs a quasi-singularity axle. This configuration acts as a macroscopic gravitational flywheel, converting chaotic cosmic radiation and extreme gravitational shears into a hyper-dense, highly stable energy storage core capable of driving macro-engineering operations. Part 15. The threshold of Type 4 latency saturation. As an engineered system expands to encompass an entire galaxy, reaching late-stage Kardashev Type 4 scale, the light speed lag between opposite edges of the galaxy reaches tens of thousands of years. At this peak saturation point, any attempt to maintain a unified galactic history, shared cultural ledger, or centralized command memory becomes completely dysfunctional. A command sent from the core is thousands of years out of date when received at the rim. The galaxy-spanning entity hits an absolute latency wall, forcing a complete structural shift away from historical coordination and toward total regional decentralization. Part 16. The permanent now as the ultimate operational paradigm. To survive and function beyond the Type 4 latency wall, a system must fully transition into the permanent now. In this operational paradigm, the system completely abandons historical record-keeping, predictive extrapolation, and long-term state tracking. The overarching macro entity ceases to function as a conscious mind remembering a past or planning a future. Instead, it functions as an immediate physical field. Every component node calculates exclusively what is required at the exact Planck instant of its present local interaction. The system exists entirely as an uninterrupted, real-time equilibrium. Part 17. information elimination and the reduction of entropy. According to Landauer's principle, the erasure or alteration of one bit of physical information releases a distinct amount of heat into the environment. In massive computational networks, continuous state updating and memory storage generate vast quantities of thermal entropy. By stripping away historical memory storage and operating purely on real-time deterministic inputs, a macro system eliminates the continuous thermodynamic tax of data rewrite cycles. Stateless operation minimizes internal entropy generation, allowing the structure to maintain physical cohesion over vast temporal spans without overheating its immediate space-time envelope. Part 18. Real-time field execution versus archival cognition. Archival cognition relies on a distinct three-step loop: observe the present, retrieve relevant historical data from storage, compare the two, and execute an action. In high-velocity or extreme-scale environments, this multi-step loop is too slow. Real-time field execution collapses this process into a single step: physical interaction. The present state of the physical environment directly dictates the immediate mechanical shift of the node, much like a marble rolling down a surface of varying slope. The slope does not consult a map to decide where to direct the marble; the physical contours enforce the trajectory directly. Part 19. The zero memory boundary in Type 5 organisms. Scaling theoretical mechanics to a Kardashev Type 5 entity, an organism or engineered network spanning multiple universal domains, demands the total eradication of memory. Across omni-cosmic scales, where independent physics parameters may vary between localized domains, any reliance on a baseline historical reality becomes a fatal flaw. A Type 5 entity cannot carry the physical laws or historical logs of universal domain A into universal domain B. It must exist at a state of absolute zero internal memory, functioning as a hyper-calculating substrate that instantly mirrors the physical rules of whichever local space it currently occupies. Part 20. The Hobart Calculus of Structural Necessity. The Hobart Calculus provides the governing framework for determining the exact memory requirements of any system across 24 orders of scale. The mathematical relationship dictates that as system volume and internal interaction speed approach the speed of light communication threshold, the optimal memory capacity of individual subunits asymptotically approaches zero, where c represents the required internal communication velocity across the system boundary, c represents the physical speed of light limit, and m_text optimal represents the maximum efficient state storage capacity of the subunits. Beyond this boundary, survival demands stateless real-time mechanics. Part 21. Comparative mechanics of biological and macro-scale memory. Comparing biological microsystems to cosmological macrostructures reveals a striking structural symmetry in memory utility. Microbiological systems, skin cells, molecules, operate with zero cognitive memory, relying entirely on immediate local biochemistry and physical laws to achieve maximum efficiency and rapid turnover. Mid-scale biological systems, humans, mammals, require dense neural memory structures to navigate complex, non-deterministic social and environmental patterns where real-time physical testing is lethally expensive. Macro-cosmological systems, Hobart dynamos, Type 5 frameworks, return to a zero cognitive memory state, utilizing generational recombination via the Hobart law of natural upgrades to shed historical data, eliminate light speed latency, and prevent thermal entropy accumulation. Part 22. Environmental friction as the sole driver of structural geometry. Across all scales, physical structure is not a remembered choice, but the direct footprint of environmental friction. Just as the wood of a tree thickens strictly along the vectors of mechanical stress without internal reflection, the complex orbital paths, quasar-jet alignments, and spatial geometries of macro-scale engineering are forced by raw thermodynamic, gravitational, and spatial constraints. The geometry of the system is the calculation. There is no hidden internal ledger dictating the shape. The environmental stress and the resulting physical structure are one continuous, undivided event. Part 23. The illusion of loss in generational node upgrades. In human-scale frameworks, the retirement of an individual processing unit is viewed as a loss of identity due to the destruction of stored narrative memory. In the Hobart operational model, generational replacement via 12:1 gestation involves zero loss. Because subunits operate without personal historical narrative, node rotation is merely a physical recycling of material and an algorithmic refining of subroutines. The operational metrics proven during physical execution are codified directly into the next generation's physical architecture, preserving functional efficiency while leaving personal narrative history entirely unretained. Part 24. Synthesis of the permanent now in macro system engineering. Synthesizing these mechanics reveals that memory is merely an intermediate evolutionary crutch. It serves biological organisms operating in medium-scale, slow-velocity environments, allowing them to bridge the gap between past experience and immediate survival. However, at both the microscopic baseline of physics and the ultimate boundary of macro-scale cosmic engineering, memory is stripped away. The highest state of operational efficiency, whether in an adaptive immune cell, a 12-to-1 gestation pipeline, or a multi-system quasi-singularity flywheel, is achieved when the entity sheds the weight of the past, eliminates the distraction of the future, and functions as a pure, real-time expression of the permanent now.